Hello everyone, this is Sreeja. Now we are going to discuss how to provide authentication to our web pages using node.js and expressjs. First, I have created a folder public that includes three files: home, index, and login files. Here, the home.html represents the dashboard that you have to get after authentication process. So, index.html represents the sign up page, and the login.html represents the login page. So, going on to the index.html, first we have written some CSS in order to style our web page. That is by targeting the elements using the class name and the tag names. So we are asking the user to enter the email name and passwords and getting their values using the register functions. If the user on clicking on the sign up function, here we calls the register function. In this function we are getting the values like email, password, name that the user enters, and we are calling the register route, and the logic of the register route will be implemented, and the data will be stored in the format of JSON that includes the user details, email, password, and name. If any error occurs during this registration, then we will get an alert message. Registration failed, and the response status and the response text means the error we are encountering. So if there is no error, then the registration will get an alert that the registration is successful. Then we will be redirected into the login.html page. So in the login.html, similarly we have written some CSS in order to style our web pages by targeting the elements using the class name and the tag names. So here we are asking the user to enter the email and password, re-enter the email and password. I repeat, re-enter the email and password. That is the user entered details in the sign up page similar to that of the user entered details in the login page. So if the same user, after verifying the user, if the user clicked on the login, then we will call the login function that is written inside the script in the JS. So we are accessing the email and password that are entered by the user, and we are fetching the data using the login route. So this route logic is defined in the server.js, so we can view it later. So after that we stores the data in the form of the JSON format that includes the object, email, and password. So if there is any error during this process, then we will get an alert message that the error occurred during login. If there is no error, then we will get the login alert that the login was successful, and then we will be redirected into the home page, and our console.log will show us the response status and the response text. After moving on to the home.html, here also we have provided some CSS in order to style our web page. Later that we will ask the user to enter the city from which he want to know the weather details. On clicking on the get weather button, then we will call the get weather function. This function gets the value that the user entered in the input city box. So after that, if the user does not enter any value or any text in the input field, then we'll get an alert message to enter a city name. After that, we fetch the data from the weather city route. This route includes the logic that fetches the data from the open weather API related to the user entered city name and displays that response to us. That includes the temperature, description, and humidity. If there is any error occurs during this process, then we will get an error message that the error fetching weather and the error we encountered. Similarly, if the user clicked on the logout button, then they will be redirected into the login.html, and then we will get an alert message that logged out. So moving on to the script.js. Here in this, firstly we are importing the Firebase functions that are used for authentication, and we are importing the variables that are stored in the .env file, that like Firebase API, auth domain, project ID, and so on. After that, we are adding an event listener function to our document content load that helps to manage the events during the authentication process. If the user completes their authentication, then the user will get a unique ID that will be stored in the Firebase. We are accessing that ID of the user if the user is authenticated, or else we will get an error getting the ID token. So if the user is authenticated, then they can fetch the data. Similarly, we are creating a middleware that helps to not directly access the home page without authentication. So if the user without authentication tries to access the login, tries to access the home page, then they will be redirected into the login page. If not, if the user who is accessing the home page is already authenticated, then we will ask the user to enter the city input, and we fetch the city input, and using that we will display the details to the user. If the user clicked on logout button, then they will be redirected into the login page, and we'll get an alert message that the user logged out. So similarly, after filling up the sign up forms and login forms, on clicking on the submit buttons, Here we will access the values that the user fills in that form, and then we saves the data in the Firebase, and we redirect into the corresponding next page if the response is success, or else we will get an errors. So this is the code related to the sign up page, and this is the code related to the login page. So here you can see that after successful login, they are redirecting into the home page, and after successful sign up, they are redirecting into the login page. So coming to the server.js, this includes the routes that are defined in order to handle the events. So here we are importing the modules such as .env, axons and paths and so on that is useful to create to create a website. So firstly, .env helps us to access the environmental variables that are present in the .env file, and the axios helps us to fetch the data from the weather API without any error, and the path module helps us to handle the paths in our files. So moving on to the methods, here the post method. Here the post method we include the register router that strictly allows only the post method. If not, it gives an error message including the status 405. If the entered email and password are null, means the user does not enter a proper email or password, then we will get an error message including the status 400. So after getting the email and password, we will check the user credentials and checks whether the entered email already exists or not. If it's already exists, then we will get an error message, email address is already in use, means we are not allowing the duplicate email. After, if the user is not duplicate, then we will allow the user and stores the data of the user in the Firebase. So this login route strictly allows only post method. After accessing the email and password, it checks the email and password, compares it with the previous one stored with the sign up form. If the user is same, then the user will be logged successfully. If there is any mismatch in the email or password through the login, then we will get that invalid credentials and error in login. So after that, the weather city route, this helps us to get the weather API details from the weather API, open weather API, and displays that as the response in our response page. So here the port helps the user to communicate with the server. So here I am defining the port with the 4020. So similarly I have already run it, so it is already in. So here I have already created an account, so I am logging in directly. So here you can get an alert message that is login successful. After clicking on OK, you will be redirected into the home page. This is our home page. Here it will ask you to enter the city. So I have entered the city name and clicking on the get weather button. So after clicking on it, I will get the weather details related to the particular city as my output. So after clicking on logout, you will be redirected into the home page. Sorry, you will be redirected into the login page. So I'm clicking. So here I am redirecting into the login page. So you can see that whether your details of the authentication is stored in the Firebase or not. Yes, this is the account that you have previously logged in, and the details of this account are stored in the Firebase.